Alright guys, Murph's here, and today we're going to talk in depth about accessorizing your rifles. Now, firearms trends have changed over the years, and this has caused a little bit of a conflict within the Second Amendment community, where sometimes people will frequently accuse other members of the Second Amendment community that they have too much crap on their rifles. That's something that I want to discuss a little bit further today. Now guys, we talked about other types of setup videos on this channel previously. Home defense shotguns, home defense rifles, fighting rifles, DMR type setups. I've talked about a lot of different things specific to those rifles. What I want to do today is kind of put the overall thought process of accessorizing rifles, how it is that I think about putting rifles together, specifically how it is that I outfit them, into context for you guys, so that you can have a better understanding for where I come from and how to be able to take that information, apply it to yourself, and visualize how it is you want to set up your rifles going forward. Or perhaps you're just now getting into tactical type rifles and shooting, and you want to have a better understanding of how to be able to put what it is that needs to go on, what does not need to go on. Now, a little bit of background. So, growing up, I used to shoot handguns at 25 yards, rifles at 50 and 100, and just kind of plinking. Like, we didn't really adjust sights or any of those types of things. We just kind of like shotguns to hear the rounds go off, and sometimes hit targets. And then we would zero our black powder rifles and our slug guns for deer season, because I grew up in Ohio where you couldn't hunt with rifles. So most of our time was spent on the trap range getting ready for hunting upland game of a wide variety, or waterfowl and all those types of things. And I think that's how a lot of people grew up in the Second Amendment community. Now, after the sunset of the assault rifle ban in 2004, and then also with the global war on terror going on for the past 20 years, a lot of things have changed. There's now a wide variety of people who spent a lot of their adult years working with tactical rifles, working in tactical conditions, and they want to set up their rifles like those days. There's also a lot of people who got out of the military and went and started all kinds of different firearms training academies and are dispensing the knowledge that they learned the hard way from many years of hard work and a lot of missions and all that type of stuff. Some are very credible institutions, others are a little bit questionable. Regardless, that wealth of knowledge has been imparted onto the civilian market, and a lot of people who maybe haven't necessarily served as law enforcement, military, or some type of contractor are interested in consuming that type of information. They're interested in putting rifles together in that way, be it because of video games or the movies, or maybe they thought about joining the military at one time, decided to pursue other things, which is fine. It's not for everybody. There's plenty of other pursuits that are worthy in the world other than being law enforcement or military, and I think a lot of veterans lose track of that. But they still have an interest. They still want to indulge in those types of things, and they should be able to. There shouldn't be any shame for doing so. I kind of think about it like the speed limit in my state tops out at 70 miles an hour. There is zero reason for me to have a vehicle that can go faster than 70 miles an hour. But I don't poo-poo the person with a Corvette. For all I know, they go and take it on track days. And it doesn't matter if they do or don't. That's what they chose to spend their money on. They can do that. Same thing if you got a guy, in the gym, lifting heavy, trying to get swollen, all those types of things. And he's got massive biceps, but he works at a gas station. He's a gas station attendant or something like that. Who cares? That's what he's interested in. Go for it. And as long as he's being healthy about it and not hurting himself or others, who really cares? It's the same type of thing with tactical rifles. If someone has an interest in that, they should be able to pursue it. If that's how they want to spend their money, and it's expensive, so they ain't going to have much money for other stuff, that's great. That's cool. But for that person, it might be really difficult to negotiate a lot of the different trends and stuff like that pop up, and really decide what it is that they need, what it is that's actually going to work out for them, especially if they're not living a lifestyle that actually requires them to use it all the time. The only time they really get any use out of it is when they go to training courses or they go to shooting competitions, which I hope they're doing both of these things so they can more critically evaluate their system and make it better. So that's where people who do have that type of experience need to be able to share their information. Now, there's a couple things that come along with that. I've been training around the AR-15 platform my entire adult life. I have seen a ton of different tactical trends come and go. TTPs, or tactics, techniques, and procedures that we're doing now, we were not doing just a couple of years ago. Things change. What's important is being able to evaluate that change and then apply it to yourself. So, for a fact, things that I was doing 10 years ago when it comes to rifle setup, I'm not doing today. And I fully expect that 10 years down the line, I will have changed quite a few things yet again. That's just how it goes. But with there being so many changes, I've learned how to evaluate those changes. So just like whenever I'm evaluating new weapon systems or new cartridges, I do the research, I look into what's going on, I pick out all the important things that you need to be able to know about how to apply it, when people are applying it, and then I either observe it or I put it in practice myself, and I see whether or not it's working for me. And I evaluate it based against how my mind works, other equipment that I'm already running, different situations and scenarios where I would run it, and then change or don't change based off of that. I do the same type of thing, and this is getting a little bit in a training mindset. I don't want to go too far down that path. I want to primarily focus on accessories, but I do the same type of thing in my day job. My day job is constantly changing things. We're constantly updating different procedures and techniques and all that type of stuff. And not everything that's come out was good. Not everything lasted very long because some things were very quickly identified as not being that helpful. But critically analyzing those procedures is the key thing here to be able to decide whether or not it's something that needs to be put to rest very rapidly, or if perhaps it's something you just keep in the back of your mind for future use. Because sometimes, as is said, there's nothing new under the sun. Sometimes things change just enough that that old procedure is actually quite helpful. All right, so with that being the case, let's go ahead and get into some of the nitty-gritty of setting up your rifle with one overwhelming important caveat here. This is kind of bringing it into reality before we start really getting into the accessories, guys. In all reality, all you need is some sort of sighting system and some magazines to go to the range and just, shoot at static targets on a flat range and all those types of things. If that's what your pursuit is, and you're thinking that you have to spend a whole bunch of money to accessorize your rifle out in all these crazy different kind of ways when all you're going to do is sit at a bench and just shoot the rifle, you don't have to do that. Get an optic or something like that you like, and then run it that way. The one thing that I would caution you about, though, from that mindset is if things go sideways, which the last couple of years have showed us that we're not that far from things going sideways at any given moment. When things go sideways, every gun that you have suddenly becomes a defensive gun. It doesn't matter if you bought this one over there for plinking, and this one's for hunting, and this one's for precision shooting, and this one's for, defending the home or whatever it may be. All of them just became defensive guns, potentially, because they are guns that you own. So just kind of keep that in mind whenever you're thinking that, well, I never intend to use this gun for any type of serious use. Someday you might have to. It might be the gun that you defend yourself with. So maybe start trying to get some training or something along those lines. That's what I want to highlight before we start getting into a lot of the Gucci stuff. So let's go ahead and start talking about Gucci stuff. Things that I start observing right off the bat. So I develop a purpose for whatever rifle it is that I'm working on. And then from that purpose, I start deciding what features and stuff like that I'm going to really focus on. So that's where we get the fighting rifle concept and the DMR concept and home defense and all those types of things. And all of those have slightly different requirements. Now for fighting rifles, I've got my big three, optic, light, sling, with a little bit of a caveat thrown into a backup sighting system, but those types of things. However, how do I evaluate that stuff? How have I looked at it over the years in order to be able to decide whether or not it was something that was helpful? So first off, let's look at things like weight. Now, when I was much younger, I wasn't as concerned about weight. I automatically put heavyweight things into the category of being durable. And that was the greater concern to me, was that I wouldn't break it. So I would be completely fine with carrying more weight. As time has gone on, as I've gotten a little bit older, my knees are starting to get a little creaky, I'm a little bit more interested in weight. Weight is not the goal, but it's definitely an enhancer. It's definitely something that I'm interested in. So when it comes to things like this Spikes Tactical Crusader go-to rifle of mine that I previously reviewed on the channel, this thing is fairly lightweight for its overall setup, coming in at like just over 7 pounds. This is something that I could definitely see myself carrying great distances and all those types of things while still being durable. However, this light, this is an Enforce WML XL, something like that. These lights have a bit of a reputation for not being terribly durable. However, they are lightweight and they have a plastic housing and all this type of stuff. That was something that I really liked about the lights, as well as having a pretty good output and were fairly inexpensive. However, I've started to move away from these. One, I had a bad customer service experience with Enforce. Two, the durability aspect of it. Yeah, I'm not necessarily running out there and torture testing these optics, and I'm not trying to like jam them into door frames and all that kind of stuff. However, sometimes that stuff happens, especially if you're working around barriers, and working around barriers, having to do switch shoulder type shooting, the tactical type shooting is how I evaluate a lot of rifles, especially when we're talking about fighting rifles. So durability of the light is something that I start to become concerned about as I start working in narrow confined spaces where I might have to jam that into, you know, the wall or something like that. That's something that I become concerned about.
Hit! Hit!
So that has caused me to start preferencing lights from Streamlight or Surefire because they actually have a metal construction. Yeah, they're a little bit heavier, but they're also more durable. And at the end of the day, I still revert to needing a certain amount of durability or having a high durability expectation out of different systems that I work with. Now, another thing that I don't put, or a thing that I don't put a high premium on, and this might be kind of surprising to some people, is comfort. Comfort is a secondary goal for me. It's not a primary. I draw the line at whether or not something causes me physical injury, physical harm. If we hit that point of discomfort, it's unacceptable. I need to get rid of it. I need to find something that's better. However, when it comes to things like A2 pistol grips, as you guys can see here, this used to be an A2, however, I've dremeled off the A2 bump. And that is because under long days of shooting and stuff like that, I found that it was giving me a hot spot on my finger and actually caused like a little blister. So at that point, it has now caused me, though fairly light, it's caused me physical harm. It's time for that to go. However, I'm not bothered by the grip angle of the A2. As much as I would prefer a more vertical grip angle, I'm completely fine with this. It doesn't hurt me. It doesn't kink my wrists in an uncomfortable manner. However, it's already on the rifle. It's inexpensive. And it would cost me more money, time, and effort in order to swap this out instead of just dremeling off what's already there. So that's what causes me to prefer to do this. Now, when it comes to things like vertical grips, some people like vertical grips, some people like angled foregrips. To me, it depends on what it is that I'm working around. If I have a nice long setup like this, I'm not as worried about it because I can get my hand pretty far out there and I can drive the muzzle and all those types of things. It doesn't kink my wrist uncomfortably or anything along those lines, and I have plenty of surface area to be able to work around whatever it is I need to work this rifle around. However, when it comes to things like this Galil Ace Gen 1, previously reviewed on the channel, this has a fairly short handguard. I also have a couple of other AR-15s that have fairly short handguards. Now, I prefer to have something that I can grab a hold of and kind of give myself a little bit more surface area to be able to pull against or in general be able to grip. So now those I start to like either vertical grips or angled foregrips on so that it helps me be able to drive the rifle. That's the thing that I'm really worried about at the end of the day, is being able to drive the rifle into whatever it is that I'm trying to do. But on super short setups like this 300 Blackout 6.5-inch short-barreled rifle, previously reviewed on the channel, having no type of grip or even an angled foregrip puts my wrist into an incredibly uncomfortable position. This is an unacceptable level of discomfort. So I switched over to a vertical grip. Now, this grip used to be a grip pod, and I hate grip pods. They are overly large, they're overly heavy, and they are not good bipods. However, I have a whole bunch of them, and I didn't pay for them. So I have no money invested in them, and no problem cutting them down to a stubby grip in order to be able to get more use out of them. Saves me a little bit of money, and it actually repurposes them in a manner that's somewhat helpful. At some point, kind of like the pistol grips, I'll replace them with something that's actually purpose-built for whatever it is that I'm trying to do. But for right now, these are helping out, so I have no issue with them. Now, optics. Optics are an incredibly subjective thing. I remember when I was a much younger man, I was really big on iron sights because that's what I grew up on, other than high-powered magnified optics. Iron sights. Iron sights were the things I wanted. I didn't trust red dots. I didn't like the possibility that an ACOG could be, knocked off zero or in some way damaged and then useless to me, so I just wanted to run iron sights. However, my first tactical rifle course showed me how fantastic a red dot can be, and that's what I've defaulted to ever since. Now, of course, I also like low power variable optics and even some fixed powered optics. It all depends on what it is that I'm working towards. And those are the types of things that you have to think about. Now, accessorizing wise, when it comes to triggers, that's entirely subjective. Ambidextrous charging handles, that's entirely subjective. Ambidextrous pieces and parts in general, that's entirely subjective, in my opinion. That's pure preference at that point. There are plenty of people out there who are convinced that ambidextrous is the way to go and all that type of stuff, and I think a lot of it has to do with your training background. I grew up on AR-15s before ambidextrous features were standard, before the M4A1. So I learned how to operate single-sided safeties with my offhand. And that's something that I still kind of default to if you put me under pressure. So ambidextrous controls, just purely based on my background, would actually require more training in order for me to be able to make that change. Whereas somebody who's coming in off the street doesn't necessarily have that type of background built up, they might cotton to ambidextrous features really fast, and that's great. That's absolutely fantastic. I marvel at the time it is that you came in where that is just more or less standard. That's great. That's awesome. Good for you. For me, it's a secondary requirement. It's not something that I assess as needing right off the bat. And that's just one of those key things that you have to keep in mind. Not every gimmick that you add on to the weapon is actually helping out. Now, getting into handguns for a moment, because we've been solely talking about rifles at this point. You'll see a lot of different things with handguns. On rifles, where I say that I'm not necessarily all that worried about the grip, though I do really like this Magpul grip here on this rifle. On handguns, I do get kind of bent out of shape on grips. I look for something that has an aggressive texture that really hangs onto my hand and make sure that I can really lock that pistol in to be able to work with it. Now, when it comes to like Glock finger grooves on the Gen 3s and the Gen 4s, I have never been bothered by those finger grooves only because they line up fairly decently with my fingers. However, on the Gen 5s, deleting the finger grooves is pretty excellent, because if I'm not bothered by the presence of finger grooves, but I don't find them to be a help, then I'm not bothered by the absence of finger grooves, which is why if someone asked me right now, which Glock should I go with, I would tell them a Gen 5, as long as it was in the model and caliber that they wanted. Now, when it comes to things like flared magwells on handguns and lights and optics and all those types of things, I think it really comes down to what type of use that you're trying to get out of it. If you're talking about a competition gun or perhaps a duty gun that you're wearing on a belt, all of those add-ons are helpful. If you're talking about a concealed carry handgun, I start to question how concealed your handgun really is at that point. I've known an awful lot of people who are concealing a handgun when there is no question that they have a handgun. I actually used to shoot with a fella who was just this small, super muscle-bound guy. He had to be like every bit of 5'8" and just jacked, absolutely yoked, and he used to wear like kids small t-shirts, and he would carry a Glock 19 with an extended magazine and a Surefire X300 and a Trijicon RMR and a flared magazine well, and he'd carry appendix, and he'd pull his size 2 small shirt over top of it and be like, see, can't even tell, when like there was no question that you could basically read the serial number off of that handgun with how tight everything was on him. That's not actually concealment at that point. You basically are open carrying. keep in mind with that whenever you start adding stuff to a concealed carry gun. Same type of thing whenever you're talking about accessorizing out a rifle. There's an awful lot of things that you can add to a rifle that become snag points and could potentially become detrimental to you. So like the tail hook buttstocks, I'll just go ahead and beat up on that for a little bit. I've never cared for them because it's a giant hook. And yeah, they're minimalist and they're lightweight and all those types of things, but they don't look terribly durable. And then if I'm working within a confined space, there's a good probability that they are going to catch me, or that they're going to get tangled in something and really mess up my fluidity. Same type of thing, whenever you're adding lights. Now, lights become a necessary evil when it comes to tangle points, but you need to keep an eye on what's going on with them in order to be able to avoid them being tangle points. Now, also when setting up lights, you need to keep an eye out for being able to operate them in an ambidextrous manner. So on this rifle, that's why I have it set on top, so that I can reach it from either side of the weapon system, which is fantastic. However, it does kind of mess with my front sight. Now, these are backup sights, so I don't really mind that. Now, if I'm using these, things have gone pretty sideways, and it's probably pretty close shooting, I'll be okay. However, on some other rifles, it becomes a little bit more difficult when you have it set up on just one side. You kind of have to change how it is that you manipulate the system at that point. That's one of the issues that I'm having on my work rifle right now. I have a Flood, a Surefire M300 set up on it so that I can have IR and white light flood whenever it is that I need it. However, I'm having an issue with my sling placement and all those other, and a PEC 15 and all those types of things that are getting in the way of me being able to be ambidextrous how it is that it's set up. Now, the easy answer is to go with some sort of pressure pad. But one of the issues that you run into with pressure pads is that you might potentially accidentally discharge the light. And you don't want to do that at the wrong time. The people you're working with might get really upset if you're working within a team. So that's one of the things that I start looking at doing, like 45-degree offset lights and all that type of stuff. And that's something that I'm going to have to upgrade on my work rifle, which is unfortunate, but I have no money invested in that light right now. So I guess at the end of the day, whenever I have to get rid of the rifle, or give up the rifle and the light, I'll just take that mount with me and mount it on one of my rifles at home. Now, lights, lasers, all those types of things, the IR capabilities, that's really getting into the Gucci side of accessorizing a rifle. And it's something that I haven't gotten into yet on my personal rifles, because who has the money? You're talking $2,500 minimum for low-end NVGs, let alone $18,000 for the ones that I'm used to working with. I don't have that kind of money. I don't have that kind of time. The mounts themselves are $300 minimum to be able to put them on a helmet. That's a lot of money tied up in it, to then also have to throw on some type of IR designator and an optic that works with NVGs. Now, there's a lot of optics out there that are fairly inexpensive that'll work with NVGs, but IR illuminators, and they're not even as good as the one in the military, and they're still super expensive. So at that point, seeing as I have nowhere to shoot at night, it really makes no sense for me to have an NVG capability. Now, if you are if you're law enforcement or perhaps a contractor of some sort to where you would need to supply your own equipment, maybe NVGs make more sense at that point for you to be able to spend that type of money. Just, man, that is miserable. And that's just one of those things, as much as I would like to have the capability to be able to practice in my off time and have that enhancement and make it a literal, be able to spend more time making it a second nature thing instead of just having to find the time to do it at work, it does not justify the cost to me. And I think it's something you should also critically think about, especially if you don't have a place to shoot at night, especially if you're not hunting at night or something along those lines. You got to really critically assess whether or not that's something that's going to be helpful to you and is actually worth the cost. Because I've evaluated it multiple times and I've gotten really close, and then every time it's just money that kills it for me. I can't pull the trigger on that. Now, ultimately, guys, one of the other mindset things that I always think about is application. And what I look for whenever I'm putting these things on the rifle and however it is that I set it up and all those types of things is consistency. Consistency builds speed. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That's the idea, right? And you get to slow being smooth and smooth being fast by being consistent in what it is that you're doing. So, yeah, there are a lot of tips and tricks out there that will refine what it is that you're doing and make it fast. But if you can't do it consistently, if you can't hit those those points, those mechanisms, those buttons, whatever it is that may be, reliably, then it'll never be fast. All you'll do is rush to failure at that point. So there are a lot of things that I still do on gross motor movement because I know that I can hit that gross motor movement every time. Handguns, I overhand rack because I shoot a lot of different handguns, and a lot of times the slide releases in different places, and from the standpoint of being able to have a consistent motion, overhand racking works on every handgun. So that's what I do. Now, I can get fairly fast reloads even with overhand racking. Would they be faster if I switched over to hitting a slide release? Yes, absolutely. It would be much faster. It would be possibly even a better flow of motion depending on how it is that I'm doing it. However, that gross motor skill is something that I have never missed. And because of that, I will continue to train that. You need to look at those same type of options whenever you're talking about maybe putting extended controls on something or whatever it is that you're trying to optimize for your purposes. Is it actually fluid? That's the critical assessment that you have to make at that point. And same type of thing whenever I'm practicing for these videos, or I'm preparing to give a briefing, or I'm getting ready to instruct on something, I'm going to give a class. I spend a lot of time rehearsing what it is that I'm going to say so that I have fluidity of conversation, so that my words are already pre-selected and I know what it is I'm going to say at different points and all those types of things, and it just flows smoothly. And that's very key. That's an important aspect of being able to convey information to somebody. And sometimes there are words or phrases that I want to use, however they get stuck in the brain sometimes. They don't make it all the way to my mouth the way that I want them to. So with that being the case, I change up the words that I use, still conveying the meaning that I want to, but having a good solid flow to what it is that I'm trying to say. That way there's no hiccup and the information gets received in the manner that I want it to. In this case, the information is bullets on targets. So you need to make sure that however it is that you're setting up the rifle flows naturally for you, even if it's considered to be suboptimal by somebody else. If it's something that you can do every time, it's worth your time. And time will come with it. Might mean you have to do more work. Might mean that you have to spend a lot of time in front of the mirror practicing and all that type of stuff, or filming yourself at the range and going over the footage critically, and really beating yourself up on not getting something perfect. But if that's a worthy pursuit to you, then go for it. Put in that effort, put in that time, build those reps. Good solid reps beat rushed, questionable reps every time. All right, guys, I think that pretty much covers what I have on this particular subject. I hope you found this interesting. It was kind of a rant, it was kind of a gripe, but I felt like it was something that needed to be said. I thought it was something that needed to be clarified, and I hope you got something out of it. Now, for those of you who are just interested in the informational aspect of this video, this is a great time to go ahead and check out. Have a good day. It's pretty much what I got. However, I do have kind of an admin thing that I want to cover with you guys here in a second. So, to everyone else, have a good day. To the rest of you, stick with me after class. All right, guys. So, I've been considering setting up a Facebook page for the channel for some stuff that I have coming up. The next year is about to be very tumultuous for me. There's going to be a couple of gaps in coverage and all those types of things. And I want to be able to make sure that I'm maintaining contact with you guys, even if it's on a different social media platform. Still giving you, it might be easier for me to give you updates on there, maybe little teasers, have like discussion forums and all those types of things to be able to remain engaged with my consumer base in a way that I can't be engaged on YouTube, potentially coming up based on Wi-Fi accessibility or a whole slew of things that are coming up. I got a lot of stuff on my plate coming up in the next year. So with that being the case, and this might have actually already happened by the time this particular video goes up, go ahead and check the description to see if I have established a Facebook group. If I have not, I want you, and even if I have, I want you to go ahead and hit me up in the comments section and let me know, A, how it is that you have your rifle set up. I probably should have included that in the before section on this, but whatever. I guess those guys missed out. Let me know how you have your rifle set up. And 2, what it is that you would want to get out of a Murph's Law Facebook page. All right, now with that, that's pretty much what I got. I hope you guys have a good day.